You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I'm Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Hi there. So excited to be joining us today. I'm excited that we're hosting a special episode of the podcast today in honor of National Fire Prevention Week. And this year's theme is Cooking Safety Starts With You. Pay attention to fire prevention. I did have a burn injury that was related to cooking safety. So this is definitely a topic this year that's special and near and dear for me. So I'm excited to welcome our special guest here in just a moment. But before we do, Rachel, do you want to go ahead and introduce today's podcast partner?
Yes. So today's podcast is powered by one of our fire prevention partners, Telgian. Telgian is committed to providing effective and innovative fire protection, life safety, and security programs. And you can learn more about them and their services at www.telgian.com. So our guest is pretty familiar with Telgian, so I'm happy to have her on today. So our guest on the podcast is Pamela Reno, who has more than 20 years of experience and knowledge of concepts, principles, and practices of fire prevention, fire protection, and life safety engineering in the healthcare, engineering, consulting, and manufacturing industries. She facilitates process development, documentation, and technical leadership, and administers training to ensure company and regulatory policies are met. Mrs. Reno oversees fire and life safety components of planning and design, including resolving issues during construction and ensuring codes, plans, and standards are in compliance. Pamela has also established and maintained a fire-safe environment by protecting patients, personnel, visitors, and property from fire, smoke, and other products of combustion for hospital, campus buildings, family health centers, and surgical centers and regional practice sites. So we are so excited to have Pamela on the podcast today.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Hi, Pamela. So we so appreciate having you on today's episode, especially in honor of National Fire Prevention Week. Before we get started into kind of asking you some questions, we always like to give our listeners a little bit of like, why are you here? Kind of what is your experience in the fire industry, or how did you get involved? So if you could share a little bit about that with our listeners first, we would really appreciate it.
Well, how did I get involved in fire is actually a unique story, to be honest with you. It's actually a funny / wow type story. I actually got into fire by happenstance. And what that means is that I was doing my co-op when I was in college, doing my co-op with a architectural and engineering firm. And I'm actually an electrical engineering major by degree. That's my degree, is in electrical engineering, not fire protection engineering. So when I got, the co-op, I was hired as an electrical engineering co-op. And so I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. Well, it came down to me and another colleague. We came into the program about a couple weeks, difference. And he got the offer of the electrical engineering position, but they still wanted me on staff. So they offered me the fire protection engineer position. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That has nothing to do with my field. I don't know fire protection engineering. I need to learn. I need to be taught, things in that nature. And they said, oh, we'll teach you. Don't worry. You're quick learn. So you'll be able to catch on pretty quickly. And I was like, I was still like kind of, hesitant, I guess you can say, because, I went to school for electrical engineering. But I took a chance and I said, sure, why not? I ended up, teaching myself a lot of things, as well as, getting to go to classes and things like that. And I just fell in love with the industry. To be honest, I could not see myself doing anything else. I enjoy looking in the code books. I'm like a code geek. I love to look in the code books, and and understand, why we're doing things the way we're doing it. And, I want to protect people, so that's how I got into it and how I stayed into it for so long and everything. So it's a unique story.
That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more of what fire protection engineering even is? Because when I think of fire protection, I think of smoke detectors and making sure I have my fire escape plan.
Yeah.
But what does the engineering component really entail?
Well, it's the application of science and engineering principles. So, to protect people, and their environment, the property, from harmful fires and, obviously the destructive effects of that fire. We're also, fire protection engineering is we also known as, risk engineers and loss control people. So we try to prevent, the fire. How do we prevent the fire is with, as you said, that smoke, detector is try to, get that, notification right away, but also sprinkler systems. That's like a huge thing in a lot of commercial buildings, hospitals. Now it's starting to come into the home atmosphere and things like that. So those are things that fire protection engineers do. And a lot of it is also life safety. How do you get out of the building? What is, that escape plan, as you said, to get out of the building. Everybody always says, well, I'm going to go in the same way I came out, come out the same way I came in. Well, might not be always the best route, so you have to always have those options. And that's what we're here for, is to help you with those options of life safety, getting out of the building, sprinkler protection, fire alarm protection, and the like.
So as the fire protection engineer and regional practice leader for Telgian Engineering and Consulting, I'd love to know more about what that means for your day-to-day now. So I know you talked about how you got involved and you're kind of put into the position. What do you do today to help with that role?
So I run the region. So basically what that means is I have a team about, 10 to 12 people. I think it's 12 now. It's growing. We're growing so much lately. So, and basically what I do is I bring in some of the business. I go out to different organizations, whether it be an architecture firm or even, a new client, which, I'm here now, where I do an assessment of what they need. So I can come in, I do an assessment, tell them, hey, this is what you may need, this is what you may not need, and just give them those, options of, okay, this is the type of sprinkler system you need to utilize if you want to store, commodities at different levels, different heights, and everything like that. So what my job is that with having those many people, I actually, have my assistant regional practice leader who also helps with, when I bring the work in, he farms it out to to my staff and to his staff. So, we're kind of like a tag team. I bring in the work, he does, he makes sure it gets done. But we're always, looking to make people safe. That is our main concern, is to make, organizations, hospitals, manufacturing facilities, anything safe. And everybody's like, well, safe, how does it safe? Well, there's many facets of safe, from a fire safe to, and mainly what we do is fire. We want to make sure that, their commodities that they're storing is not at a high risk. And if it is, they're properly protected, so that in case there is a fire, heaven forbid, that they are properly protected.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just, we think about our homes and fire safety, and you don't even think about when you're going out to eat or going to work or school or whatever it may be, all of kind of the behind the scenes work that has to go into that fire protection plan.
You don't. It's funny because my husband sometimes gets embarrassed, because every time I go out, I constantly am looking up and everything, making sure that there's a sprinkler system or a fire alarm system. It's funny.
Yeah, no, my husband, his dad was a fire chief. So he grew up very, fire safety is really important. And it's funny because we'll go out to like a new restaurant. He's like, so how are we going to get out of here if a fire breaks out? I'm like, I love that that's the first thing you ask me, but can we also not just always be staring around and finding all the sprinklers that are in the room?
Absolutely. I totally understand that too, because you don't want to think such, morbid thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah, but it's certainly important. And you would hope that all buildings are safe enough that we wouldn't have to worry about that on our own.
Mhm.
But, unfortunately, that's not the case. And we got to, protect ourselves and make sure we stay safe as well.
Well, absolutely. And like, as I said, in the course of a day, I can be checking, some plans, I inspect building plans and, making sure that they have the right sprinkler protection, fire alarm protection needed for whatever commodities that they're going to store in that warehouse or whatever type of building they want to have, something from a mercantile, which is, your grocery stores or your Marshalls and things like that, is going to be something way different than a warehouse. So, those are things that on a day-to-day basis, we as, fire protection engineers look at to make sure that they're properly protecting that space.
Definitely. So what's, one thing maybe about your job or just in general, like the fire protection industry that, people are often maybe surprised to learn about or surprised to hear that takes place?
So I guess the one thing is, when I say sprinklers, a lot of times, people think when I say, oh yeah, I used to design, or my company designs, sprinkler systems. If I don't put that word fire in front of it, they think I'm talking about lawn sprinklers, and I'm like, no. My company, and I used to, when in my very beginning of my career, I did design sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems. So, that's like the misconception, I guess, when I don't put that word fire in front, that people are like, sprinklers. I thought you were I'm like, yes, fire sprinklers. I designed those in the building. Life safety. When I say life safety, they think, oh, just making sure, egress, exit signs. And I'm like, well, it's a little bit more than just exit sign locations and making sure you have a fire extinguisher, within so many feet. I said, it's a lot more than that. So, when I go and explain it a little bit better, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize you did all that. And I'm like, yeah, we can, we do all that. And it's surprising. And I sometimes talk to my family about what I do, and they just, my family's like, oh my gosh, they don't realize exactly what I do sometimes, but it's fun explaining to them.
So I know, Pamela, there's always some like hot trends, right, going on in the industry. And I say hot as like a loose term, right? But I know, right, whether it's something that's happening in the news, like recent, Maui wildfires or things,
Yep.
there are some like trending topics that probably bring some certain things to light, or I'm sure like clients for you guys ask a lot about. Is there any topics right now that your team is looking at and going like, these are things that we get a lot of questions about, or maybe people are asking about a lot?
Yeah, so some of our clients are, because insurance companies are now, because of all the fires that have been happening, are asking lots of questions. So, our clients are coming back to us, are we okay? Are we protected safely? And some of our clients are asking for us to do that fire testing to make sure that what we are, telling them that they are able to store is actually okay, and that those, sprinklers are capable of, withstanding that little fire, so to speak, that may not become a huge fire. So that's a lot of times what our clients are asking us is, making sure that they are properly protected. And if they're not, well, what can we do to do that? And can we do some fire testing? Because that's one of the things that, Telgian has been really, I guess, pioneering right now, is the fire testing. And a lot of our clients are asking us to do some fire testing on different type of commodities for them to see, will this burn? Will this not burn? Or if it does burn, how big are the flames, and things in that nature. So that's some of the trends that we're seeing lately. It's just because of the insurance companies, I guess, knuckling down on more stricter policies,
Guidelines, which is good for everyone, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying it's not, but so
Right.
I think it's great.
Yeah. So how do, if your team comes in, let's say someone's building a new office building and you come in and you help set them up with their initial fire protection, what's the follow-up like? Or is that kind of on like the business owner to kind of make sure they're staying current, or, even homeowners checking their smoke detectors and replacing the batteries? Like
Yeah.
how does that stay up to date and regulated?
Well, from a commercial standpoint, once we do, we have another side of the house, I guess you could say. So we have, we're the engineering and consulting side, and we do have an inspection, testing, and maintenance side of the house. So what we try to do, is if our client, once they're up and running, we try and, incorporate utilizing our other side to test and inspect their systems after they've been installed. However, the installing contractor sometimes has that warranty for a year. We'll, if anything happens to the system for a year, we'll gladly, come out and help. But, it's just a matter of what the client wants, as far as if they come to us and say, hey, I want you guys to inspect and test our systems on a yearly, quarterly, whatever the code requires basis, or they may go with another, firm to do that testing, which is absolutely, fine. We try to keep it in house as much as possible, obviously, but but yeah, absolutely. The client has the option to pick another firm, but it's really up to the client. But we do tell them, hey, after, so you have to do yearly inspections and things like that.
Yeah, because unfortunately, when we do see, commercial fires, particularly, there tends to be out of date systems, or not, or improperly functioning fire sprinklers and things like that. And I mean, even just sprinklers in general, we've had them around for how many years? And people, when you were talking about, people immediately think of a lawn sprinkler, but it's like, we should all have fire, home and commercial building sprinklers in every building.
Yeah, it's coming, I think, to be honest with you, in the homes and everything. But absolutely, in the commercial sector, we should all be protected. And it's amazing to me sometimes when people take over buildings and they want to make it their own, some of the lack of information that they do have, and how people, and I'm not blaming anybody, but sometimes things happen, and but you want to make sure you're up to date with all your inspections and testing and things like that. And that's what's the bad part about it is some people tend to be more reactive than proactive. And that's where we have to step away from that. We have to be more proactive than reactive. We don't want to see a fire. We don't want to see, anybody have, their business, get caught on flame. So let's be proactive about that. So, so that's like that's the thing we need to get out there more, I think.
Yeah, not putting it behind and just doing it when it needs to happen.
Exactly.
Well, I like when you talked about like the handoff too, right? Because we assuming, right, like we make a lot of assumptions when folks like pass things off. Like I would have assumed the person before me did their due diligence and were proactive, but there's no way to really know that for sure. So as a fire protection engineer, what do you like most about your job? Like, what do you enjoy doing the most? I know you do. I think you do some traveling, it sounds like.
I do actually. I love to travel, don't get me wrong. And traveling's not for everybody. I love to travel. I think there's just 40. I've traveled to 46 states, no, 45 states. I believe there's 5 states that I've yet to travel to with this position. So you get to see a lot and everything. So I do enjoy that. Don't get me wrong. But now in my new position, I don't travel as much as I used to, which is fine. I don't mind. That's other people can get to do the traveling and everything. But I think the most, as I said earlier, I love looking into the code. I'm on several code committees through NFPA that, I get to make the code, I help make those code requirements. And that's like, so I just get excited about it, because as I said, I love looking at the code. I love talking to people about what I do, what we do for Telgian as a company and everything, and getting new clients on board. And I'm at a new client today, and yesterday I was, introduced to a new client that we, have, and, just talking to him about it, just I light up. I think I light up anyway, because I love talking about it, making sure that his facilities are protected properly. And that's all I care about. I want to make sure that you're protected. I don't want to, you to, I'm not going to give you anything that, I'm not about, selling to just make all this money. I want you to be protected. Yes, everybody is, in the business of making money. Don't get me wrong. But our main goal is for protection, making sure you're properly protected. And that's what I love to do. And then, looking in the code and being able to answer the clients, with our expertise, it's a great feeling.
That's awesome. Well, and you certainly do light up when you start talking about code. I don't think I would ever be cut out for that position. So I'm glad someone who is so excited about it can.
I can't say I would light up for it, but
well, that means I'm in the right field then, right?
That's right. You've picked your passion for sure.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I understand we need more FPEs or fire protection engineers. Specifically, you're in a very male-dominated field, correct? So
yes.
Let's talk a little bit about why we need more, and kind of like, what would you say to someone, maybe a female, who's considering getting into something like this?
Well, we do need more FPEs because right now, our industry needs the talent. A lot of, we're in high demand, as I said before. A lot of people now are being more proactive than reactive because they're seeing those fires. They don't want things, being basically I can't talk now. Being, they don't want their business to basically be consumed by a fire. So, because of
Which is
that,
good to hear and promising. It's promising to hear that we're being more proactive and not reactive.
Being more proactive, absolutely. But a lot, 25% of our workforce is going to be retiring in the next 10 years. So when you hear that, you're like, oh, we got to get the younger generation up to, and things like that. So of course, we just need, more people in this field because we're just in such high demand and we want people, talented people to, or even, if this maybe isn't something that you're thinking about, to think about. I didn't think I was going to be a fire protection engineer going into electrical engineering, and here I am, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So, even though you may think of another engineering field, maybe you look into that, fire, realm and be like, well, what can I do? We don't just burn things, we prevent things from burning. So, and then for women, I always go back to what my dad told me, because when I told my dad I wanted to be an engineer, he goes, are you sure? Are you sure? Because it is a male dominated field. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. I can't see, I love taking things apart, trying to problem solve and, trying to figure out the best solution. That was my mindset. And, I loved math and science. And so when I said, my dad suggested engineering, however, it is a male dominated field. I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. This is what, and just because it's a male dominated field doesn't mean a woman can't kick ass at it, to be honest. I think I'm doing I'm where I am because I busted my butt, but I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have the talent and didn't have the, wherefore to do it. And women just need to know that they're capable. And if you love math and science, go into engineering. You don't have to always go into the, that, marketing field or anything, or things of that nature. That's what I say. Don't be afraid to just, follow what your passion is. And as I said, engineering has a lot of math, but to be honest, I don't use half of the math that I learned in college. So.
We won't tell your college professors who said that.
Yes, exactly, right?
That is so true. It is, like you said, a male-dominated field. So do you think, women in the field maybe bring something different to the table, or I guess how would you encourage other women to join or consider even just the engineering field in general, maybe not even just the fire protection?
Well, area? A lot of times, they say that women can be more emotional than men, which I agree, we can be, but sometimes emotion is good to have. because we take a step back and be like, okay, let's look at it from a different angle, so to speak. How can we, either whether it be fire protection or electrical or mechanical, how can we make this, if you're a mechanical, how can you make this car more comfortable? Maybe and I'm not saying that they don't think of these things, but from a female perspective, it's going to be different than a male's perspective. And same with fire. I'm thinking, as a mom, I'm not a mom. So as a mom, maybe you're thinking of, how do I protect my children? Not to say that fathers don't think that way too, but maybe, those are different aspects that I think that maybe from a female perspective, you have more of a different sight to see, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So it's just different. It's just a different perspective than more, as I said, we have more more emotions sometimes, which and as I said, it can be a good and bad thing, but sometimes I think it's great to have more of that emotional side to it.
Definitely. I think you bring, right, like everyone brings their own life experiences, but if it's a male dominated field, right, the female life experiences aren't necessarily brought into the field. So I think that's great for sure.
Absolutely. And they should, and women should just not be, I think, because some women think, well, I'm not going to get heard. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. Just make yourself heard. That's what I say. And we have a lot to say.
We sure do. So do you have any advice or tips for anybody wanting to get involved in advocacy? So I understand you're involved a lot in NFPA, and then you love doing the building codes. But tell us a little bit more kind of about, I know their advocacy can take many forms. So it sounds like you're on some NFPA, committees or whatnot. But in addition, I'm sure like you mentioned earlier, you just advocate because you know so much about fire prevention. So what are some ways that you kind of have gotten involved in advocacy, and what advice might you have for someone who wants to get more involved? And maybe they're not a fire protection engineer.
Right. And again, I get involved with my committees, that I'm involved in: NFPA, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, American Society of Healthcare Engineers. I get involved with those societies. I recently moved to Delaware, so I'm going to get involved with that chapters of those, societies and things like that. So those are things from a professional standpoint that I can get involved in. And then from, I guess a voluntary, I always, it's funny. I don't like giving blood, but I will, and everything if I have to. So, I'll donate blood, but, just for help, and things like that. Just getting out there, to be honest with you, going to a golf outing and just talking to people. Some people, you just, when you're introducing yourself, oh, what do you do? And I explain, I'm a fire protection engineer, or, for Telgian, or I say, well, I'm a regional practice leader for Telgian Engineering Consulting. And that, well, what is that? What do you do with that? And I'll explain, and like, oh, okay, well, I think I need to talk to you. And it's like, it just opens up doors to where you can go. And, going to conferences, we just came back in August. We did a conference for American Society of Healthcare Engineers. And, they're like, oh, I remember Telgian. You guys do the fire testing. I'm like, yeah, we do, so they know us and everything like that. So for me, that's how I get involved, and I try to stay involved in that aspect. And things. And again, your colleagues, I always, even though I may not be working with them, I'm a different company than I was, 10 years ago, I'm still involved. I'm still talking to my colleagues, asking them questions, bouncing ideas off of them, because that's what we need to do in this field. You can't just be all, narrow mind, based and stuff. You have to open it up, and, the more people we get involved, the better.
Yeah. I think networking is super powerful for sure.
Yeah. And the fire protection and advocacy, realm, I feel like it's one of the more collaborative, industries than we really see, from anywhere. I think a lot of people know NFPA. They know Sparky the fire dog.
Yes.
But
Sparky.
but they may not actually know Telgian and some of that behind the scenes work and how everyone is being collaborative. And I think that's just so powerful. And helps, evolve and transform and continue the evolution of the fire protection industry, because we can work together instead of, oh, well, I'm over here on my own and I want the business over here. But when we work together, we can make such a greater impact.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, NFPA has these conferences, Society of Fire Protection Engineers have conferences, so everybody can come into one place and, collaborate and learn from one another. And that's all the whole idea. We're all in it to protect people, and that's the main focus is we want, we want to protect the business, but mainly it's the people. That's the, we want to protect people and make sure that they're all well protected and that's all it's about. And, so that's how I get excited about, going to these conferences and talking to other people and being able to learn from other people. And, oh, I didn't realize we could do it that way. There's always so many different ways to solve a problem. And that's why I love engineering, because there's multiple ways that you can solve a problem, and it may work, well for one person, but another option could work well for another. So that's how it's great to be collaborative.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know we will talk a little bit about fire protection here in a moment, but, we have a lot of survivors or healthcare folks listening who maybe can't get too involved in like the building codes and that engineering side, but want to help spread awareness of, the importance of fire protection. Aside from, helping with Fire Prevention Week and Advocacy Weeks, let's just say someone's sitting at their office and they're noticing maybe that their building's not up to code, or maybe they see somewhere that they could have improvements. How could they approach that situation, or like, what would you recommend they do to, help bring more awareness to the fire protection?
Call me.
We'll put your number in the show description, and they can call you right up.
Right. No, to be honest, one of the things I get, is, how do we do that? And, if I'm sitting at, a desk and looking up and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't see any sprinklers. Am I supposed to have sprinklers? That's like the obvious question. Or wait a minute, there's no smoke detector. Am I supposed to have smoke detectors? Not every place is required to have, smoke detection in every room or things in that nature. You just need to, I would think, reach out to an organization like Telgian. You go on our website and see, and we can help you and understand that. One of the other things is, what if my mom and dad, they were like, yeah, you look in the building and fire codes. I'm like, yes. And they're like, so nobody is going to look at that unless they absolutely necessarily have to. So I wouldn't say that they should be doing that, but, just ask questions, ask their upper management. Hey, have we thought about this? Ask maintenance, because your maintenance staff knows the ins and outs of your building probably more than anybody, especially those older people, and I say older, but, the people who've been with the company for so long and everything like that. They're a wealth of knowledge. Utilize them. Absolutely utilize them. Just because they're, in maintenance doesn't mean that they don't have that wealth. I utilize my maintenance department, and things like in my old, firm. They know everything and anything. Talk to them, say, hey, why don't we do this? Or what's going on with it? They'll know. They'll be like, oh, we decided to do it this way. Or if they don't know, they'll know who to ask. And that's, you just have to know that you can utilize anybody in your company, whether it be your upper management or even your maintenance staff.
Yeah. That's such a great point. I wouldn't have thought to, well, I work from home, so I guess I'm my own maintenance staff.
Exactly.
But it's definitely, I wouldn't have thought, you're so right. Like, they do know the ins and outs of the buildings, and they probably know when the last time someone was there to check on things in the buildings. So
absolutely.
It's definitely a good idea. Cool.
Well, go ahead, Rachel.
I do want to shift gears a little bit to talk about, the cooking side of things. And, it is Fire Prevention Week, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show.
Right.
So since 1922, so it's a little over 100 years, the NFPA has sponsored the public observance of Fire Prevention Week. And this year is all focused on cooking safety. Cooking safety is, I don't know if it is the leading, or if not, it's the second leading cause of home fires, unfortunately. So Pamela, do you have any cooking safety tips? I know you're more focused on, the engineering and I feel like business side of things,
Yeah.
but do you have any cooking safety tips or you want to share with us?
Well, one of the things that I think is important is watching what you're cooking. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm just gonna, step away for a quick second," or uh, and again, I don't have kids, so I don't know. But a lot of times maybe the kids are fussing and things, and I'll just be a minute. If you have to walk away, I would suggest shut off that burner, shut off that oven, because you just never know. Even walking away for a little bit could, mean, something. And, so that is my, recommendation is just to make sure you're watching what you're cooking. I know that I have a smoke detector that's fairly close to my kitchen, and every time I boil water, it sometimes goes off, and which it's a good and bad thing, because it's like, oh man, again. So but again, if that wasn't there, would I know? So always watch. I've been in the habit also to just step away from that stove for a second and then come back, and the water is like really boiling. He's like, oh my God, I wasn't gone that long. But you just never know. And that's just the important thing, is making sure that you are watching what you're cooking, that you're not having the burner on too high for what you're cooking, as well as the oven. Make sure you're looking at the recommended temperatures to cook that, lasagna in, and things like that.
For sure.
Definitely.
And I think it's important too. You said children. As my accident happened downward, right? So like explosion of something down.
Yeah.
So I always, whenever I talk to folks about, kitchen safety in general, I'm like, do not let your children in the kitchen.
Yes.
And we had a guest on the show as well, that has like underneath, children can have the ability to be underneath you a lot when you're cooking, right? So for me, it's like, children are out of the kitchen, right? Like gates on either side so that they're not able to come in, because you just never know. Like you said, if that boiling water is going to go over and it splash onto them, or you drop something that's hot, that makes me nervous. And that like their head is at the most risk, right? For like head and face. So yes, when you say children, it always makes me cringe. I'm like, no children in the kitchen, because I just get
absolutely
nervous.
I agree 100%, because they can distract, not only because they can distract you, but they themselves, the hands, I always remember my sister's kids, when they're growing up and stuff, they're grabbing at things, always trying to get stuff. And if that burner's hot and they're trying, you just, I agree 100% with the kid, no kids in the kitchen, while you're cooking and everything. And then the other thing is, I know nowadays that, the newer ovens have all the mechanisms up at the top now, but some of the older ovens have those dials at the, at the side. And that also with kids, at that height, you just have to be very careful that they know that that's bad. They can't be touching that. So I agree 100%, the kids out of the kitchen.
Definitely. Yes. No, it's, earlier when we were talking about keeping up with maintenance codes in your buildings and things like that, also keeping up with keeping your house safe, not in and out of the kitchen, but checking your smoke detectors. It's a great time of year to check them, checking, is your oven working properly? Is anything weird happening that could spark cleaning your oven? I know not my favorite chore to do, but important to do, because that can also cause, you may think you're doing everything safe, but you may have dropped something in there that could catch on fire. So
and you're 100% right, Rachel. Because I've had, where I made a pizza and the cheese has dropped, and it's and you just smell that smell, and you absolutely have to keep that oven nice and clean and everything. Because again, the more and more it can spark. You just don't know what's, so absolutely it's cleaning. And, you say smoke detectors, don't wait until you hear the beep, 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 from that smoke detector to change out your smoke, your batteries. Make sure I know that me and my husband are constantly like, I think we have like just every 6 months. That's what we do. Every 6 months you change out those batteries. And we have that where we're changing out the batteries every 6 months, and, get in the habit of making sure, put it on the calendar, and put a reminder.
That's a great idea.
So you know to buy those batteries, because, most of the time you don't have the C volt, the C's or whatever, the 9 volt, batteries that, the smoke detector takes all the time. So make sure you have a stash of them. We went to Costco and bought a whole big thing of batteries, double A's and the C9s for those, smoke detectors. Make sure you have them on hand, that you're not waiting like, oh crap, I have to remember to go buy a battery and stuff, because to be honest, if you don't write it down, you're not going to remember to buy batteries unless you hear that beep, and that's too late. You need to make sure you have the schedule.
Yeah.
My husband and I also, speaking of Costco, bought like fire extinguishers for everyone one year for Christmas. And it was like, especially after my accident, like you should have one. They have the little like kitchen ones that you can stick in your kitchen and check their expirations. One year we were like, and everyone was like, why are you giving this to us as a gift? I'm like, it's to keep you safe. Like this is like, you need this in your house. Like, and this is something that just, you never know when you're going to have to reach for it. So
but know how to use it too. Absolutely.
Right.
I always like to use the PASS, expression: pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. So, I've always, so that you always want to make sure if you do have a fire extinguisher, you know how to use it. Absolutely. And that's where you pull the little mechanism, you aim it at the bottom of the fire, and, you squeeze it and you just sweep back and forth. So you just want to make sure that you know how to use it, but absolutely have a fire extinguisher, and make sure you're checking that date on the fire extinguisher.
I was going to say, is it expired? Yeah,
exactly. Cause they can land, in commercial buildings, you have to check them on a monthly basis to make sure, but at home, do you still have to do that? So those are things you have to think about. Oh, wait, am I checking my fire extinguisher on a monthly basis at home? Probably not, but check it, make sure that dial still shows that it's green and able to be utilized. So absolutely. So that's why I like to give myself calendar reminders of different things that
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, my husband and I set calendar reminders all the time on our phones, but it's always great to have that to remind. Oh, yes, I was supposed to do that today.
Exactly. That's what I mean. With this digital age now, you have those reminders you could do. Even Alexa, you can have Alexa set it for you.
Right.
Let's just call it out right now, and then maybe everyone's Alexa will remind them on the first of every month.
Absolutely.
And, for our listeners too, you can always reach out to your local fire department or fire organization if you, even if you need smoke detectors or need help checking them or whatever it may be, especially I know my local fire department during Fire Prevention Week, especially, is always handing out free smoke detectors. So contact them.
Yeah, don't be afraid to utilize them. They're absolutely wonderful. They're willing to, and even they're willing to help you install them too, or especially for the older community, I always, suggest them to reach out to the fire departments, because, they'll be willing to come
on a ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll come to your house and do it for you and everything. And so they're more than happy to help you and just utilize them. They're great resources.
For sure. I think it's also important to know, like you said, like some people don't feel comfortable, right, testing it or whatnot. Right. So if you're not, I know last year we did have Lorraine from the NFPA here. She also talked a lot about having a plan, especially for seniors, of like, if you do have a fire, knowing what to do ahead of time. So do you have a meeting spot outside of your home? So it's a good time to start having those conversations, right? Are my smoke detectors? I think this week in particular reminds us that we have to do those things. So even if you don't set those phone reminders, like this is your reminder now. Have you checked your smoke alarms? Have you, checked the expiration on your fire extinguishers? Do you have that fire exit plan that we talked about last year on our podcast? So those are all really important things I think that we need to remember. And so hopefully this serves as that reminder.
And with those fire exit plans, you should be doing it yearly, especially because the kids are now getting older. If you have kids are getting older. You may have, said one thing when they were this age. Well, now it's changed, or, you did some renovations to the house. So you have to make sure you have that fire exit plan and the kids know it and to practice it. That's the other thing. It's well and good to have a plan, but if you don't practice it in an emergency, it's not going to matter. Exactly. So the more you practice, the better you're going to be, do it. It should be a fun thing, just, as a fun activity, I guess you can say, and everything. So don't make it so, it's a negative thing. Just to help you, and, make it a fun activity, do it, every other month or something like that, so that they know this is what needs to happen. And especially for pets too, if you have pets, what happens to those pets?
Who's grabbing the pet?
Yeah. Do you have a plan in place for that? So that's another thing you need to think about as well. So, I mean, you sometimes you don't think of these things, and I have to, I had 2 cats, now I have 1. And that's my biggest fear, is my pet, because I don't have kids. My pet is my kid, so that would just devastate me and destroy me if that's something were to happen to him, because of that. So absolutely make sure you have a plan in place.
For sure. Well, we really appreciate you joining us, Pamela, today. Before we do our final wrap up, I do want to remind those listening that they can learn more about Fire Prevention Week with the NFPA. And we will put the information in our show notes as well, but nfpa.org. And then they can learn more about Telgian and the fire prevention efforts that Pamela talked to us today about at telgian.com. So we'll make sure all of that information is in our show notes. And we really appreciate you coming and talking about National Fire Prevention Week with us and more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Well, we appreciate it as well. Before we go, though, we do ask our guests 2 final questions. Okay. The first question I have for you today is kind of what advice you'd have for those that aspire to be a fire protection engineer. Where do they start, right? Maybe they're in college, maybe they're just looking for a job like you were, and not interested in going into fire engineering, but kind of found that path. So would you have any advice for those folks?
I would say if you're take a chance. That I took a chance, and that what's the worst that can happen? You don't like it? Well, then you pick something else, but to be honest, you're going to fall in love with it. Just like I fell in love with it, and I can't look back and see what my life would be what I'm doing. I love what I do. And, but that's my advice, is you just take a chance, because you never know what you can do. Not only with just fire protection or fire prevention or suppression, or, as an FPE, but as any engineer, you just take a chance. And even if you're a woman, take that chance, because, if you love that math and science, engineering is a great field for you. And I took a chance, fell in love with it, and won't look back. I can't see myself doing anything else. So that's the thing I just would tell. I've told my nieces and nephews that. And that's what I would tell anybody, if they're struggling. Well, I don't know if engineering is for me, but I do love math. Try it. Right. Try it. Your freshman year is going to be all your core classes anyway. So just take a chance and take one of those classes and see if it's for you or not. And, what's the worst that could happen? You change your major? Who doesn't change their major? I didn't, but or fortunately, but a lot of kids now, you never know what you want to do, but just take.
It's hard to decide.
Yeah. I changed my major. Don't worry. You're fine.
My sisters changed their major as well. So, it's and this is your time to do it, and everything, and see what you are passionate about. And that's why you take that chance.
No, that's some really, really great advice. Thanks for sharing. So our final question today, it is our Phoenix Partner question, which today is sponsored by Telgian, an organization dedicated to saving lives through innovative fire prevention and life safety solutions. So their question, or maybe even your question, because you work there, is what is something you're grateful for today? It doesn't have to be burn community, fire protection, anything related. It can be anything.
I am grateful for my family. I really am. So I couldn't be where I am today without them.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. So thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us today. This is a really special episode. I loved, even for me learning, I learned so much more about the fire protection engineering, and now I'm going to be staring at every ceiling that I walk into of every building. Maybe I'll even ask to read the code just to see what I can find.
You can always look it up online. It's available. So if you want to learn more, absolutely. But I love it.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And we appreciate that you're kind of representing strong female women in that industry. So continue to do that great work that you're doing. Rachel and I always appreciate strong female, representation. So really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you so very much for making this fun. And I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you, taking the time for me.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great rest of your day. And again, make sure that you check out National Fire Prevention Week and use this as your reminder to stay up to date on all of the things for your cooking safety this week.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Crafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.